Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larson, back with our repeat guest, Richard C. Wilson. If you didn't catch the previous episode, I am always handing out Richard's book to other CEOs when they want to do fundraising. It's called Capital Raising. He's got many books, millions of social media followers, events, so many things. Richard, when you introduce yourself, what do you start with? Because you've got a whole portfolio life of offerings and opportunities.
Sure. Yeah. I usually start with just that I'm a father of three. I've been married for, 14 years. I live in Hawaii. I'm a third generation Eagle Scout. I think, too much business stuff puts people to sleep sometimes. But, the challenge of my business is I run an investor club focused on family offices. And most people don't know what a family office is, right? So if I say, I'm CEO of Family Office Club, some people think I set up offices in people's basements, right? So I usually start with more personal side of things. And then we basically just run a big investor club. It's essentially what we do.
Yeah. Can you give people a scope, talk about, the kind of numbers of your in-person events, your newsletters, Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, social media followers, and just what you've done over the last 18 years?
Sure. Yeah. The last 18 years, we've put on 300 investor events. We have a 20-person team. I've published 13 books. We have 17 million social media group members and followers, and about 90% of that is on LinkedIn. Most of the rest of it is on Facebook. We took 12 years to buy billionaires.com. That's how long the negotiation took. And we're doing a number of things with that. We're interviewing 100 billionaires. We have 45 of those interviews done. And we built an AI tool that takes 986 public talks from billionaires, fed it into an AI tool so you can bounce your questions, opportunities, and challenges off the collective intelligence of these 400 or so billionaires that are, have given these public talks. So those are some of like the high level numbers and some of the things we're working on.
Very cool. Well, I'm super interested to talk about all things AI these days. Will you talk about what you're doing in AI and investor tools and fundraising tools?
Yeah, love to. So we have 5 different tools that we've developed ourselves. We hosted an AI mastermind and we spent a few hundred hours on this area. So one thing we've done is we identified all of the white papers, best practice checklists for private equity, real estate, institutional due diligence, fed them into an AI tool and basically trained it so that we can upload a PPM, a pitch deck, whatever I'd like to it, and it will identify red flags, things that are missing, smart questions to ask. Or if you're in the middle of due diligence, you can share your concerns with it and what questions you are going to ask, and it will suggest additional things you should ask. So we call that DUI. It's our instant due diligence advisor tool. So that's one of them. We got a couple of others like the billionaire tool. We have also one where it takes your pitch deck and then analyzes it in 25 different pieces of criteria, and based on all the investor advice given at our events, and then basically spits out a report and tells you all the different ways you could potentially improve your pitch deck and what an investor's first impression may be, et cetera.
I think that's such a thing that gets missed often when it comes to AI is, if your system is just using the same large language models everyone else is, what really is your competitive advantage? Where that proprietary data of your recordings from 300 events, it's not like those guys haven't said similar things in other places, or, there's probably not too much that's like earth-shattering that's only been said once and it was at your event. But there's this other aspect of like, no, you have a collection of like-minded people doing deals within these kind of ranges and these kind of industries, and they probably have said things that they only said it that way once and it was on your stage. And you've got proprietary training information.
Yeah, part of it is making it so the LLM is more hyper specialized to a vertical. And you could ask any LLM medical questions, but if you took every textbook and every medical journal and every article you could find that you could legally use to do it in a niche of medical medicine, like say it's parasites or parasitology, whatever, and you fed it in there, you're going to get more dialed in, concrete, and you can engineer that tool so it spits out the advice in the exact format you want. Because if you talk to a general LLM, it's going to be muddled by other general information, non-expert sources, might not be as updated or thorough, because the LLMs are scraping with bots, Wikipedia and this, that, or the other, but they're not going and getting transcriptions of every YouTube video from a parasitologist on YouTube and they're not doing some of these other things. They're not that advanced yet for these little niches. And so we're trying to, we've gone one layer deeper than I think most people. We're trying to go another 2 layers deeper. And we spend a lot of time thinking about that right now.
Yeah. Um, what is most encouraging to you from what you guys have accomplished so far?
With AI, with AI, I think it's getting the feedback randomly from investors saying, wow, that just saved me hours of time having this Dewey due diligence tool. Like, it just saved me so much time. So that's the most like gratifying, because at the end of the day, running an investor club, if you keep the investors really happy, then, things are going to work out well. And then the other thing is just using it every single day. There's always more and more use studies coming up of like, Bezos says you need to be very decisive. Well, sometimes, it's challenging to say something without burning a bridge or upsetting somebody, and AI can help you say it in a nicer way. It's more polite. Or sometimes it's analyzing lots of information, and just as long as you have 70% of the information, just go in a certain direction. And with AI, you can be more decisive and thoughtful, but also more polite and professional. So I think that's something that's been really helpful to me, because I try to pride myself on moving quickly, but I get hung up sometimes on making sure I don't damage a relationship or, act too rashly, etc.
Yeah. By the way, the pitch deck analyzation tool, is that something that other
Yeah.
people can get access to? What's that called, or where's that at?
Yeah, it's called the Pitch Success Score tool. And while it is reserved only for our investor club members, if anybody wants to get like the first half of their results or something, they can just email us. We'll run their pitch deck through it and give them the first half for free, just to show them that like it's real and it works, and give them some value. We're happy to do that.
Where should they be emailing, or where do they get that email address?
Just richard@investorclub.com would be the best, easiest email.
Great. I'm interested. You look at these 18 years working in the same sector. What are the changes you see coming in this industry that maybe not everybody else sees?
Yeah, one thing is that there's a lot of events now in the space. I think this year there's 240 events globally in the family office space. And a few years ago, there was 100. And a few years before that, there were 50 or 75. So there's a lot more people operating in the space. That's one change. Because the word is getting out there more people are aware of what it means. But also some people abuse it a little bit, or there's some confusion around it because it's in people's heads without them really understanding all of it. So some people will say, oh, family offices manage money for the ultra wealthy. I'm syndicating real estate deals. I manage money for the ultra wealthy. And even though they're a real estate sponsor syndicator, they say, oh, we're a family office. We manage your money. Whereas that's typically not what people mean when they say family office, or that's not the only thing a family office does. And so that's something we've definitely noticed. But there's a lot of excitement around it. I think one thing has become super clear is that one relationship can change your whole life. Like, you could meet one investor, another investor, and then you meet another investor, and it goes 10x, and you have all the capital you need, and you have a publicly traded JV partner, or a centimillionaire, or a billionaire. And that's become really obvious over time. It wasn't like super obvious to me at the beginning. I just thought, oh, you'll just raise larger checks if we do a great job at this over a decade or two. But it can literally be life-changing, just one relationship.
Yeah. I was going to ask about that. I have a friend in Texas right now. He's been he's a chief investment officer for years and has led family offices, and maybe, I don't know, 20-ish years in the industry. He's he's between families right now and trying to look for the right fit. And I've just been trying to make some introductions for him. And we were talking about events, and he said it's so tough because a lot of the most premium offices don't necessarily want their name out there sometimes. And then you get
Right.
a bunch of people, like, especially if a family office's event is free to the family office,
Right.
people, he says there's basically like a lot of imposters. There's a lot of people wanting to represent themselves who are really, they're just there to eat your fancy dinner and be seen with the right people. And he said that, it can be hard because you can have such real players, but it isn't always as easy to figure out who's who. Do you have any advice
Yeah.
for that?
Yeah, it's one of the most challenging parts of our business, because we'll interview people, figure out who they are as an investor, figure out what side of the fence they're on for coming to our investor club event. and being able to pick through and ask like some really sharp questions and look at their LinkedIn profile. Some people will say, no, we don't raise capital. And then their LinkedIn profile will say, expert capital raiser, contact me for passive investments, and like just something like blatant like that, right? And they like run 3 funds, right? And it's like, okay. And they're like, no, we're an investor. We invest from our fund. It's like, yeah, well, your fund is made up of other people's capital and you're constantly pitching it. So if people do that, we just never invite them back again. We only have 180 people on our blacklist who have like banned from our events over the years. It's usually just more like if someone does that, we see how egregious it was, or if they're just not a good person to associate with, and they'll just explain to them nicely how it works, or just ban them from the events. But it is one of the big challenges, the nuances of our space for people that don't know how it works. I mean, it can be confusing and challenging for sure.
Yeah. When you think about almost how it's become cool to say you've got a family office, right?
Right.
That seems to be muddying the waters more in my observation right now. And yet, like the really professional ones, I mean, there's so many advantages, long-term thinking, and they're I find them. I don't know if you feel this. You've got more experience than I do, but I do find like the really great family offices usually comes from some entrepreneur, and there's a lot of entrepreneurial DNA instead of maybe a lot of like financial analyst DNA and spreadsheet DNA. So like sometimes they can be such incredible partners for true entrepreneurs because you're not just raising money from MBAs and finance majors. You're raising money from entrepreneurs. I don't know if you
Oh
feel
yeah,
differently.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I think our whole investor club is just founders who need to raise capital and find capital partners, and then we have super founders who have had a 7, 8, 9 figure exit or more, or they cash flow at those levels or more every year, and it's just connecting the super founders to the founders, and they recognize that DNA in each other. And if they're talking to someone raising capital and they do not see a sharp entrepreneur that they respect, who's kind of like them, who's super concise and pointed and adds value and is respectful and patient, if they see the opposite and they see someone who's high pressure, stressed out, highly anxious, doesn't know the ABCs of business, is not an entrepreneur, doesn't have potential to be a super founder, like you're out instantly, like you're done. And I think a lot of people don't get that. These are like savvy entrepreneurs. Like 95% of the family offices we work with are that. We don't work with a ton of second, third, fourth gen. They're just looking to diversify their money, and not invest directly at all. We really work with entrepreneurial types.
Yeah. What are some other insights of just being in this space all these years that over time have come to you that maybe weren't obvious in the beginning?
Yeah, sure. I think one is that after, there's 245 books authored by billionaires. And then there are, these 45 billionaire interviews we've done. We've done a lot of fireside chats on stage with them as well. And what's interesting is that when you listen to them, they almost instantly reject what the herd does. A lot of people think there's safety in following the herd and like, oh no, this is the best practice. This is how everybody does it in our industry. And when people say that, their hair stands up and they want to reject that idea. And when people tell them it's impossible, no, that's not how it's done, that doesn't follow best practices, that's when they lean forward and think that's possibly where the magic is. Because they know if you just copy the herd, you're going to be average at best. So they're looking for something that could be exponential and it has to be super unique. And so they really gravitate towards that very strongly for those that are worth 100 million plus. You can be worth $10 million by mostly following the herd and just being really, really good. You're just better than the herd. But usually to get way, way above it, you have to be more ambitious, more hungry, more hardworking, maybe more focused, maybe ride the momentum of a good wave. So that's one thing. And the other thing is just that when you look at it, to be different, they have to take actions that are different. But those actions are based on a mindset or thoughts inside of their head. So it all rolls up to having the right mindset. It's not about the actions, because the window of time in front of you and what opportunity set is there is going to change over time. So it's not so much what did they do, it's like how do they think? And then if you can adopt what they're thinking, it doesn't matter if you don't want to be a billionaire. Most of us just want to be worth 5, 10, $20 million, and then we're ridiculously successful compared to most other people around us, right? So it's more about adopting those parts of the mindset that's most important, I think.
Yeah, I was looking through the list and, we've got a tiny bit of overlap. I had Jeff Hoffman on, and Like I've got
Yeah, yeah.
Mitzi Purdue and Bobby Castro coming
Oh,
up.
great.
But
Yeah.
I would say like 90% non-overlap. So I'd love to hear about some of your other favorite interviews, or just like what, like, I feel like sometimes like reading their books is so good, but then when you actually talk to them, they say it in just this other way that you didn't get from their other interviews or
Yeah.
their other books. I would love to hear any of those like aha moments for you over those interviews.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. One is recently on stage, we interviewed Larry Connors, and he said that 90% of all problems are people problems, and 90% of all opportunities are people opportunities. And just saying it in that way, I think just helps you keep it top of mind because everyone says team is most important all the time.
And for people
Tony
not
Robb,
familiar with his background, can you tell people about him?
yeah, sure. He grew from nothing, a $5 billion real estate platform, mostly in the apartment space. But importantly, what he takes this mental mindset of doing literally what people tell him is impossible. And a normal maintenance person at an apartment building will process 4 to 7 tickets a day. His average is 27 tickets a day. And he does that by hiring nobody from his industry because they all come with this baggage of what's realistic, and he sets benchmarks, expectations, and processes that are wildly different than everybody else, and he does wildly better. So he's a great example of what we were talking about earlier. I like some people like Sam Zell and Tony Robbins said that proximity is power, and that's the whole point of doing a podcast like this, right? Interviewing people, attracting people to you, running an investor club. It's all about proximity because you start thinking like them, and then you make great connections, and then great things happen. And a lot of people say, "Oh, you work hard to get lucky. You work harder and create your own luck." But the definition of luck is that it's random chance, not based at all on actions you've taken. So it's not possible to work harder and then say, "Oh, I have good luck because I worked harder." Well, it might make people feel nice who are less successful than you, but that's not luck. That was you making it happen, right? Like you putting yourself in proximity. So those are some of the things. I think that a lot of these people, the billionaires, are like very generous. They like to live life like full throttle, as Sam Zell would say. And they are doing things at a level of excellence and ambition and work ethic that others just can't match in their space. And so, um, that hunger to learn and read everything in their niche, like Mark Cuban claims, you don't need to know everybody or have access to all the money. You just have to pick a niche that's super valuable, learn everything in it, and then outwork everyone in that niche, and you're going to win.
By the way, did you get to interview Sam before he passed?
No, I didn't
Oh,
get to
okay.
interview Sam. Yeah, Mark Cuban, I did.
What was that like? What
And
did you learn from Mark?
yeah, well, the most interesting thing is on Shark Tank, you see him just destroy a healthcare supplement company because they don't have like scientifically, based trials, and he's yelling at people on the side of the basketball court, and can be a little bit like rough edge sometimes and very opinionated, which I like about him, just like Tillman. But in his feedback to me, is basically saying you have to put your employees in a position where they're highly valued and they're basically your partners, and they win big when you win big. And that alignment, and just hearing from him how important the team motivation and alignment aspect is, I think was just interesting because it kind of maybe is not what people would think first. I mean, a lot of people think, from the media that cover them, that the billionaires are just these ruthless people that don't want to pay any taxes and are laying off people, and companies go bankrupt and they don't care. And like, all this negative stuff that the media likes to publish about them. But it's not been the case with all of them I've connected with. It's been super generous.
Um, that's that is a fun insight that probably doesn't get as many of the headlines, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't pop on social media as much, so it gets spam filtered out by them.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't fit the narrative of billionaires are evil, which is, the drum that gets beaten like 80% plus of the time. All their philanthropic gifts, the people they employ, the parts of the economy that they spur forward. Cuban, when I talked to somebody in his family office who showed up at our event in Dallas one time, I said like, "Hey, can we help you with sourcing deals and just bring you exactly what you want?" And he said, because of Shark Tank, they just have like way too much deal flow. But he basically calls it venture philanthropy, is what Cuban refers to it as. It's like he doesn't care if it ever sees the light of day. A couple of them will. Maybe overall the portfolio makes some money over time, but he just sees it as good to reinvest into entrepreneurism and spread ideas on Shark Tank to just help people.
That's a fun philosophy, right? Um,
Yeah.
so let's talk about this, because so many people would love to find that that perfect family office investor who really gets them. And
Right.
yet, sometimes they don't have a website. You can't find a phone number. Um, and let's say they do go to your event and they actually do meet them. Talk to me about
Right.
some of the rookie mistakes that people make that keep them from being able to build a relationship.
Yeah. One rookie mistake is going around shaking everyone's hand saying, "Are you an investor? Are you an investor?" Because like when people feel the desperate tone, they're going to say, "Oh, no, no, no. I think the investors are over there." Right. They just don't even want to hear what you're selling. Right. The other big rookie mistake is thinking that by promising a massive return, that's how you're going to raise the most capital. People want to invest with others that they trust, are solid, they can rely upon their high conviction and their value add process, not who promises the highest IRR on their piece of paper or pitch deck. Like anyone can put down any number. It means absolutely nothing. If you put down a huge number, that means you don't leave yourself any room to over deliver and you're just promising the moon because you have no other credibility to stand on. So that's an instant rejection by a lot of people. Some other huge mistakes are, and these cost nothing to fix, is everybody should have a one-liner summarizing their whole pitch and why an investor should care they exist and what they're offering. And they should have a one-sentence description of that compelling pitch. They should have a 1 to 3 minute video from a founder and have that on their website, their pitch deck, their one-pager. A lot of people are just missing a one-pager. They just have an overly long pitch deck. They're missing a one-liner. They're missing a video from the founder. They stress the returns like that's going to cure the fact that they don't have other things to stand on. So it's more of a, add value first, build context and trust, build relationships, and be more pinpointed in who you approach and how you approach them so that the relationship starts out kind of like a business friendship where you adding value to them first. And, things will just go much better versus some of the amateur hour mistakes we were just talking about.
Yeah. When you think about any of the folks who've joined the Family Office Club who have done significantly better than the other people at building these relationships, if there's somebody come to mind, you don't have to share their name if you don't want, but
Yeah.
what are some of the activities they did? What are some of the feelings you get from them?
Yeah. Like calm and confident, usually extremely focused, usually doing something very different than other people. Like, okay, if you are doing a space that's crowded, like multifamily or storage, are you doing it only in San Diego? So you know the name of every asset owner in San Diego. So it's either more focused or just super unique and compelling. Usually when you hear what they're doing, you lean forward or say, "Oh, that person's a lot like me. Or, I have a lot in common with that person. I could do business with that person." You get kind of that natural subconscious feeling of it. And yeah, we've had some come in and do extremely well. Michael in our club, he had never raised capital before. He came in, he was struggling to raise $8 million. It took him about 9 months to a year to get through a $4 million part of that raise. He learned strategies through our club and credits us with getting the $8 million raise done. And then after 3 years, he had a $100 million exit in that space. And he's an example of, he's a black belt in martial arts. He has the right mindset, learning the techniques, the hard work, the follow-up, discipline. Yeah, I think those are things that other CEOs had to have grit to become ultra wealthy and discipline and focus. And they recognize those things on a subconscious level, I think. So I think that, part of it is it's hard to fake some of those traits because they're just dropped through subtle uses of even words that you use or how you focus your time, et cetera.
Interesting. You get interviewed a lot. Um, what's one of your favorite subjects to talk about, even if it's something people don't usually ask you about?
I think it's acquiring strategic choke points and looking for a strategic points of leverage where if you get that one thing done, everything can go forward. Like it's going to catapult things forward. And so an example of that is, writing the book on capital raising is one of the earlier books out on the niche, or like acquiring billionaires.com. And now if we can make it top 3 website on billionaires and have the most strategies there and have the best AI tool related to billionaires, then I think that's going to be a great choke point that'll really open up doors and build relationships, et cetera. And it's a strategy from Vern Harnish in Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. He talks about this strategy if anyone wants to go learn more about it. But a lot of choke points don't cost any money. It just might take hard work, might take focus, and then everything else gets momentum, or many things get more momentum once you have one done, and it's easier to acquire the next and the next and the next choke point after that.
By the way, what's your AI tool associated with the billionaires?
Oh, it's called a Billionaire Collective Intelligence. And we essentially took the 45 billionaire interviews that we've done, and then we found 986 public talks of billionaires. And then we fed that into the AI tools. So we can ask questions and, strategize against it, et cetera. And when it spits out answers, it tells you the exact quotes from the billionaires supporting all of the advice. So it kind of gives references so you know who you're getting advice from in case are curious about it.
And is that a members only thing, or is that accessible to the public, or how does that work?
It is members only, but with a lot of these tools, if someone wants to get like a taste of how it works, just to see that it's real or what the results look like, I play around with the billionaires one quite a lot because again, it's not muddled with all of the information in like Chat GPT or Grok, et cetera. It's like you're literally just sitting down with 400 billionaires and saying like, hey, what would you say to this question? Or like, what about this challenge? Like, here's all the context and here's what I'm facing. Should I go this way or that way and why? And then it'll instantly answer for you. So it's pretty interesting. It's fun to play with.
Yeah. I'm interested because, there's billionaires who are so different. So it'd be interesting to mix and match and get some different opinions that way.
Yeah, for sure. I think that like the point of AI is that like you can now be expansive in all the considerations. And with Grok 3.0, Grok 3.0 now, it'll go out and you can tell it to take its time and look for 25 resources instead of 15 or something by default. And it'll check all of those, analyze it, and then spit out some results. And you can bounce those results off of other LLMs if you want to. And so, using those swiftly and many times per day, I think is just such a massive advantage for people like you and I that it's fun to play with. You can feel the momentum from it.
Yeah. Can you give us some more examples of choke points or some advice for somebody who's saying, I would like to create a choke point. I'm trying to identify which one is the best bang for the buck or these kind of ideas?
Yeah, sure. So let's say that you are running a medical practice and you're raising capital because you have one or two locations and you want to grow another location. You could find that the people who are easiest to raise capital from could be owners of other medical practices. So you say, okay, well, how could I get access to them? There might be a nonprofit association in your industry. There might be a medical practice owner club. And you could either negotiate to be an exclusive sponsor for your type of medical practice at one of their events. You could volunteer to help run a nonprofit. If you find that it's worthwhile being a member, you might want to run it. And if you could develop some sort of central resource, like in that niche, that would allow you to attract capital faster, like hosting an annual medical practice investment expo, then investing in an expo or an event or hosting one could be a choke point. Running that nonprofit could be a choke point. In the medical space, we have 23 single word and exact match type domain names like dermatologist.com. And if you're running a dermatology practice and looking to grow it, having that domain name could be an example of a choke point. And so we believe in the strategy so much, we will sometimes acquire choke points for businesses we don't even own yet or have invested in yet, because we know it's so valuable that when we run into the right person who understands choke points, they're going to say, oh yeah, we want that for sure. So I like to talk about it just for fun, like with friends and stuff, because it's like such a powerful idea. Every time I put mental energy into it, then our business grows. And it's something I learned from Evan Pagan, who was an early mentor of mine.
It's so interesting. It makes me think so much of the 80-20 principle, or, Bob Keller and the Keller Williams, his book, The One Thing, or,
Right.
So, okay, since I've got you on the call, so thinking about our business, Connection Estates, and this curating portfolios for high net worth families that have multiple luxury properties, what would be some ideas, or what should me and my team be brainstorming?
Right. One thing that can be useful is some sort of due diligence or portfolio analyzer or real estate asset analyzer tool. It could be like an AI related tool, so you're adding value first. But the most simple way to add value first is I found a one-page infographic. Like, here are the 7 mistakes that family offices admit they have made in their real estate portfolio. Or here are, 5 considerations for managing your personal real estate assets separate from your real estate investment assets. Because a lot of people realize that the things that they own kind of own them over time, especially ones that own boats or too many sports cars or something. And so I think some of those families will relate to that. But, my experience has been for projects like that, that usually accessing more capital is the bottleneck. So what I would dig into is who is the ideal, prospect here? Are they 100 million plus net worth? Are they 50 million plus net worth? Et cetera, and figure out what industries they mostly came from or what cities they mostly come from, and then really dial it in to that demographic. Because if you can speak to someone and, it's different if you say, here's a book on how to raise capital, but it's very different if you say, here's a book on how to raise capital for medical practice owners, or here's a book on how to raise capital for owners of dermatology practices. It's like you feel like you just hit them right between the eyes. And I think that marketing and response rates and engagement all go through the roof when you hit someone right between the eyes, because no one else in the world is offering a book on how to raise capital for dermatology practices,
Yeah, that's great. I mean, ours is a bit of a two-sided marketplace where it's like, the family has 6 homes, but now they're getting a little older. They're not using as much. And they're like, hey, I'd love to pull equity out of homes 4 and 5 and just, keep a quarter of it or half of it or an eighth of it. Keep using as
Sure.
much as I'm using it now, but pull my equity out. And then there's the other families on the way up who are like, I really want a 4th home. I'm already not using my first 3 as much as I want. Like, I definitely don't need a whole 4th home, but we would like to be on the beach in Italy every year, a couple of times a year. We want to build family memories there, but I don't need a whole 4th home. So for me, it's a bit of a two-sided marketplace that way. Um,
Sure.
but even just like, as soon as you said that, I was thinking about like HubSpot's website grader, right? And
Right.
where these are mostly, these are primarily luxury vacation properties. Um,
Yeah.
I bet it's been a lot of years for some of them since they've analyzed, well, how many times a year are we actually there? And,
Yeah.
what are our expenses divided by how many days of the year we're there? And, maybe because it wasn't part of the straight investment portfolio, maybe some of those things haven't been put under as much scrutiny lately.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other thing to consider is that a lot of families are torn between, like, where I live in Kailua, Hawaii, or where we have our next event in Beverly Hills. In both places, there are these multi-generational homes where the family is sad to sell it because I think in another 20, 30 years it'll be worth a ridiculous amount even more. But they also feel like there's so much money stuck inside this house. And it's like they're torn on what to do. And oftentimes it's multiple family members not agreeing with each other on what you should do now that grandma and grandpa passed away, or mom and dad are getting older, like you said. So I think that if I understand your solution right, it basically gives them an out for that. Like, even if they just want to sell off 20% or 80% or whatever the percentage is, in my experience, a lot of those homes are managed by older, the most successful real estate agents in Beverly Hills and in Kailua. And so a choke point could be some sort of special exposure to those very high-end real estate agents who are doing the house management, the property management for these beachfront homes. And in each area, you can look on AirDNA, which is a data provider for the Airbnb space, basically. And you can look at who the top property managers are in Beverly Hills and in Kailua, and you can make a list of those 10 groups, and then you could reach out to those 10 groups. And most people don't take the time to meet in person, but just 15 minutes having a cup of coffee once a quarter with all 10 of the top 10 brokers in Kailua and Beverly Hills, someone's going to complain about, I don't know if we should sell, I don't know if we should not. And if you can work it out so they get a commission when they sell that, now they're making money because of this creative solution. Now in a down market, they might be excited to allow their client to sell without selling. So that'd be some things where my mind would go on, like how to build that lead list.
I love that, especially because my company will oversee the property managers in these different cities, but like our model
Right.
is to just hire the best property manager in every city. I actually need to know who these people are anyways. Like, that's not a
Right.
huge stretch for us. That's a great idea.
I think that what you're saying right there is something that, like, so many people don't get, and it is a major strength of our company. Every single thing that we do, division, business wise, we think, how do we leverage data to get this done twice as fast, and then have the right type of value add, like bait, basically, that they get genuine value from, so they come in the front door. And if you're rolling up dry cleaners or pool cleaning companies, the very first step is, where do we want to do that? Oh, we want to do that in Austin, Texas. Okay, what is every single pool company that exists in Austin, Texas? Make a database of them. Somebody in the Philippines at $6 an hour, the master's degree can do that for you. And then you script the one-line email. The person in the Philippines that you trust and have vetted, et cetera, sends it from your email inbox, that one-line email. Then you're the one that gets on the phone with them. But then you systematically reached out to everybody. people don't do the research to figure out who all the companies are, systematically reach out to them. They don't have the resources to do that, or they feel like they don't, even though it's very inexpensive. But every single private equity firm with billions in assets have 5 to 10 people sourcing deals exactly like I just said. But they're not going after the same assets that most people like you and I are going after. They're going after like minimum 10 million EBITDA and like these huge deals. And the people who are going after the same deals as you and I typically just don't want to do all that hard work. They're like, oh, that sounds like a messy process. Or like, I don't know if that'll work or not. That sounds hard. But because it's sort of hard, people just don't do it. And then it's like this huge advantage if you actually do it.
Do you know that's literally how I got into investment banking 20 something years ago? I was
Oh, really?
I was mid-market at Citi. I had no
Yeah.
idea they were the top mid-market firm in the world at the time, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, they literally gave us lists of their like 1,500 private equity groups that were in the buyer pool. And they just had these systems of like, okay, if we can find companies with these type of assets, we know that we can get a limited auction going between, like we would try and
Yeah.
send it to 1,500, like a wash description to 1,500 funds, try and get 100 responses, like 50 NDAs signed to share who it is, and like get it down to like 6 PE funds, and we'd run an auction because we took a sell side fee. We try and get an
Yeah.
auction going between 6 of them to get the CEO the most and us the most, right? And yeah, it was my job to call these mid-market firms, so under 500 million a year. So they are not getting a call from your typical investment banker in Wall Street, right?
Yeah.
And and it was just like, what are you going to do with the company? Are you give it to the kids? Do you want out? Do you want to like sell part to private equity now and have a second bite of the apple? And it was like therapy. I was doing like on a first call, I'm doing therapy. Like, I don't know, Jess, I've been running this company for 30 years and I thought my kids were going to want it and I don't think they do. Maybe
Yep.
my one son-in-law, and I can't decide. I did it, and no wonder they became the number one in the world for mid-market. I mean, it wasn't that they didn't do big deals, but no wonder they dominated
Sure.
the mid-market. They had us having personal
Yeah.
calls from, one of the biggest investment bank firms in the world with somebody who had never received a call from somebody like us.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. So many times you'll hear, oh, well, no one's really offered before, or I'm not really sure what my company is worth. And then it's like a great opportunity. And I think that one mental model that I've developed over time is this idea of like brute force reciprocation, that like you try 1,000 different things on a niche to see what works. Like in high school, I called everybody in the yellow pages in the computer section, and I got a job making websites. I got out of college. Everyone wanted to pay me $30,000 a year. So I cold called everybody in the Portland, Oregon Chamber of Commerce, and I made $100,000 a year my first year out of my undergrad from like a state university that my professors told me, slow down, don't graduate early. You should enjoy your undergrad. And but it was boring as hell. And like, so now with Billionaires, reaching out to every billionaire I can. When I first started the business with the blog, I put out 2,000 blog posts until it caught on. And so I think the attitude of like taking tons and tons of actions and lots of experiments, but adding value first, if you combine those things, then you're going to win because you'll create these opportunities. It's not creating luck; it's just creating and forcing reality to happen in your favor. People call it like basically having high agency, and that's been key to us doing well. And it sounds like you as well.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite things you've talked about so far today, though, is proximity. I want to go back to this.
Sure.
The podcast has been amazing, 1,000 something episodes, interviewing all these great people, and I made these friends. But
Yeah.
it was like pouring gas on the fire when I started doing my invite-only dinner parties. And like, we don't
Right.
sell anything, we don't even raise money for charity. It's just, and they don't have to pay to come. But it's like
Right.
this compliment to get invited to the Cool Kids Club. But I also didn't have to pay, and nobody tries to sell me anything. So it's like, it has like, no kidding. I love the podcast. It's so great. But the events where it's like the 1-2 punch, the events are where people become like real friends. And it's like,
Yeah.
what do you think the magic is of in person that maybe in this digital age has been lost?
Yeah. Well, I recently had the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Robert Cialdini, who had studied a ton. And he reminded me that it's scientifically proven that you're 16 times more likely to sell something in person, including someone selling somebody on trusting you in person versus digital. And this is for selling Rolex watches, a vacuum, a TV. Imagine if it's an important decision. Do you think that it's more likely to be persuasive to meet a potential spouse or to buy a house or invest $1 million if you meet in person? Of course, right? None of us would want to make that decision without meeting in person. And so there's tons that go into that, like the subconscious reading of cues and how they act, and their body language says more than their words, and what's their energy feel like. But it's scientifically proven that for a normal purchase, it's 16 times more persuasive. So imagine investing your money or partnering. I was recently asked to partner with somebody, and they were going to be a 45% partner. I would be a 45% partner, and I'd only met them once for coffee. And meanwhile, the other option was to partner with someone that I've met 15 times in person and I've known for 3 years. And I was like, well, sorry, I just can't partner with someone I don't know. Like it's nothing against you. It's not personal, but it's just the reality. And so I think a lot of it goes into the subconscious body language, is this person on the same wavelength as me, type cues. And I think that some people take it too extreme, right? Sometimes the old guard will be like, digital assets, social media, what a waste of time. Deals get done in person. It's a handshake. That's all that matters. And then sometimes, Gen X millennials would be like, hey, it's all Zoom, social media. We never need to meet in person. We've got the best investor club and it's all digital and blah, blah, blah. But you're usually not raising more than $10,000 checks if you never meet in person, in my experience. And I think the magic is in the middle, and you have the digital funnel like what you've built, and you use the digital funnel to qualify people, create mass reciprocation, and they get filtered through, and then you meet many of them in person, and you cherry pick who you're meeting in person, and you curate that, and you constantly get better at those filters. And it's using the digital funnel to make those really meaningful in-person events. That's the magic. That's what I think both you and I have figured out. We're kind of living parallel lives. We've done about 1,000 podcasts, and so have you, and we're hosting these in-person events just like you.
Except I think you've done about 100 times more personal events than I have. I'm playing catch up.
Sure, no problem. I mean, like, you're probably 100 times better at some other things, but like, what do you think it is? I mean, what do you think makes the dinners magical and effective versus just being on a podcast? I'm kind of curious of your opinion on that too.
Well, part of it is format, right? I'm a people person, and I hate going to events where they overschedule the whole thing. Then they're running behind, and they like the few networking moments you have, they've cut off. I hate when they call something networking also. I feel like it like cues people to pull out business cards or something.
Right.
So we do doors open at 5:30, 5 to 6 is just hors d'oeuvres and visiting. 7 p.m. we'll do a 2-minute sponsor thank you and like a 15-minute fireside chat with one of the most important,
Cool.
or one of the most impressive people in the room, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole programming. And then dinner is like 7:30 to maybe 11:30. I mean, like,
right.
Somebody might be there from 5:30 to 11:30 with 20 minutes of programming. And the night before we do a PDF. So for who gets confirmed, they get name, photo, bio in a PDF of all 50 of the other people there. So it's we try to sit people with someone they wouldn't normally run into, but we think they'd really want to meet. But then afterwards, they just all get up and go meet that person they wanted to meet from the booklet. And it's such a time saver for them of like, who's this and why are they interested? They're interesting before you even get to the event, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
And then I think, I don't think that's the magic, but I think those things help. I think what happens is when there's enough time and people are in a generous mood, because they're not and because we don't allow plus ones, and we don't allow salespeople or consultants or people we are willing to do a smaller event. Actually, somebody that you and I know in common is hosting me at her place in New York, and we're only doing 25, right?
Cool.
But it's like every one of those 25 is going to be so handpicked, right?
Right.
And so there's a little more of a little less on guard of who's the shark that's trying to eat me right now and use me for my money, right? So some of that, but I think that there is, I don't know, I think there is this genuineness that can come through. And I think phone calls are better, phone calls are 10 times better than text and email. I think Zooms are 3 times good as phone calls. But there's something in person where there's this relaxedness, and I find it generally in person bleeds into a little more time together. Jack Schaefer, that counterintelligence officer from the FBI, wrote the switch,
Right.
And he talks about like, how do you get a Russian spy to become a double agent for America? It's like, duration, frequency, intensity, these type of things. And being in person just gives you more of that. And there's this sense of like, people will say something in person that sometimes they won't even say over Zoom, or that like, and
Yeah.
they whisper it to you, or,
Right.
but there's also this physical presence. Like I'm like, basically 6'3", right? And it doesn't come
Right.
across on here. And they're
Right.
like, just like physical and mannerisms and how jokey someone is, or
Right.
like that's
Yeah.
more likely to come out in person than even on you. You
Totally.
can
I
try
think
to
that's a
have it.
huge, huge part of it. What you just said. I think that's huge. Yeah.
I think it's like, I think we get an even more clear representation of who am I really meeting, and how much are they looking over my shoulder to see if there's someone more important here, or how much is their answer like the politically correct answer or the social media correct answer, or it's like, do I have this sense that's what they truly believe on the inside,
Right.
And I just think in person is the easiest way to get that sense and feeling from people, and that kind of like, I don't know if this is cheesy to people, but kind of like that heart to heart connection. I feel like
Right. Right.
in person is beats everything. And I love phone calls on Zoom, and in
Yeah.
person's always better.
It's so funny. I wrote down like so many notes while you're talking, just so I had something smart to say when you're done. But I'm very different than you, but I agree with everything you just said. Except for I am like extremely introvert. That's why I live in the most remote, uninhabited island chain in the world out here in Hawaii. So I'm just an introvert that runs a community, so I don't have to go shake hands and go to events and try to network, because it just kind of happens naturally now. But the fireside chats are critical. I found that if you are synced up with your demographic and you ask really sharp, smart questions to someone that the whole room respects, then everyone's leaning forward and they have a great time because they're like, oh, wow, yeah, that's exactly what I would ask or something, right? So I think that's super, super critical. One thing that we do when we do a 40-person dinner in the evening after one of our like 400 or 700 person events is we have each person stand up and just give a 30-second introduction, like a one-liner. What are they most excited about? Something about them. And then we always joke, and I'll point to a friend in the room and be like, hey, and Mike is going to start tapping his wine glass if somebody starts talking for more than 30 seconds. Because everyone, if you don't say that, someone will go on for 3 minutes and, be too long-winded about where they grew up or something. And then, the having a sense of humor part, someone will tell a joke that's pretty funny. And then if someone doesn't laugh at all, or if someone's like super stern the whole night, or if someone's joking around the whole time, it just tells you a lot about them, right? And it's like, is this person going to be enjoyable to do any business with? Or are they like super aggressive, even at a relaxed dinner? I think that like tells you so much about them. So I think for me, that's probably one of the most important things we've discussed on this, because it never comes up on the other podcast interviews. Like why is it so powerful to meet in person? And people in their heads, they kind of know, oh yeah, meeting in person is better. But they don't really understand that it's 30 times better or why it's better,
I was thinking, because I've always looked up to how you have put together such crowds. I mean, you've got scale that we don't have, and I've watched you do that for, well, I was still in Calgary, so at least over a dozen years. Okay.
Sure.
Like we mostly do dinners, but like this summer we did an AI event in Washington, D.C. with like 3 senators, a couple different billionaires, and some AI CEOs. And you even
Cool.
get to see how people treat each other. And you get to see like
Right.
who's listening to the speaker or not. And there's some other cues that don't happen in a 1-hour Zoom, that with a little bit of extended period, you start getting a lot more sense of who these people are. And I mean, think about
Right.
why wear a suit to an investor meeting instead of board shorts and no shirt, right? Like,
Yeah.
like it signals that you understand what meeting you're in. But like, even our
Right.
grooming, like, what we think about ourselves is a huge signal to others of how they should think of us.
Right.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot more of that in person. And this is a guy who loves Zoom,
Right. Right. Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I mean, I just am constantly reminded how the biggest checks in deals get closed when you meet in person, right? If you're not trying to raise 15K, 25K at a time, if someone you really trust goes into a deal and says, you got to do this deal, it's amazing, or an industry expert goes in and you follow them, you should always conduct your own due diligence, of course. But in some of those scenarios, I've seen people invest $1 million or a quarter million or 500,000 on a recommendation, but pretty rarely. They want to meet in person, ideally. And when we talked about doing a founder video earlier in the interview, like walking through your manufacturing floor and showing them Ryan on the machine and showing them the good and the bad of your manufacturing setup, so it's all real and tangible. It's super critical. And we don't have a video at all. It's like nowadays you can at least record a video on your iPhone. It's better than no video at all. Everyone wants to know who you are, and are you well spoken? Are you sharp? Are you quick? Are you someone that looks like it could be enjoyable to do business with? Because you can tell a lot more in like a 30-second video than a 44-page pitch deck a lot of the time. So, and that's partially why. So yeah, super important.
Well, what didn't I ask you today that I should have?
What didn't you ask me? I think maybe a couple of the trends going on with the ultra wealthy and their investments. It's related to a question you asked earlier about what people mess up, but I think that there's a trend to have some subgroups out there that are all about investment funds. It's like, join our community, we'll show you how to form a fund. It's like, well, a lot of entrepreneurial founders who manage their own money, they may invest into some funds for diversification, or if they find someone who's so sharp, they're like, all right, let's get to know him and we'll probably eventually invest in his fund. But a lot of them would rather do direct investments. They'll invest faster if it's a direct investment, or they might not invest at all if it's a fund. And so knowing that you're dealing with founders and entrepreneurs, I think there's this trend of people realizing that you have to be open-minded and creative, because like one billionaire I work with, we've closed 19 transactions with him, and he runs a publicly traded company. How he structures a co-GP deal to allocate all the capital somebody needs is completely different than like my brother, sister investors that are worth 20 million and they put out $500,000, $250,000 checks. Like completely different, but they both favor the direct investments. But you have to have this open-mindedness. These are creative entrepreneurs, and they might like debt or equity or preferred equity or gross revenue royalty structures or something you've never heard of before. And a lot of people just come into our investor club and mini capital raises saying, here's our offering, $5 million minimum fund, take it or leave it, and then they don't get much done, and they look around and be like, oh yeah, I don't know. I guess this isn't the right community, but it's really just not the right message. And it's not dialed into like the super founders that you're actually pitching,
Yeah. Last week I was with a friend, built a successful tech company, very successful. He sold it for $2.5 billion. Okay. So like really successful. And he didn't even start with a fund. He's right now closing his last 10 million on a $50 million fund. To get there, he did 75 million in SPVs, direct investments. Nice. And he did that. And like the guy, his last company sold for $2.5 billion. Surely this guy can go straight to a fund. Nope. He does direct. 75 million of that before starting his fund.
Yeah, we've got a couple of case studies of that. We have a 30-year-old real estate platform, family business, 500 million in assets. They went to raise a fund, and 10 million came in from people who have invested with them forever, and then nobody else wanted to put money in their fund. We have another group that has 300 million in AUM, super sharp. They tried to raise a $12 million fund, got to $4 million, and decided this is a waste of our time. So I have nothing against having a fund as an option on the menu. Or maybe if you invest in the fund, you get co-investment rights. Or hey, why don't you do 1 or 2 or 3 direct investments? But then you have to come into the fund because you either like us or you don't after 3 direct investments. I don't mind any of that stuff, but it is almost certified dumb, in my opinion, to be like, we're doing a fund, only a fund. The fund is the way. We're of the religion fund. And like some people beat that drum so hard. I'm like, why? Like, is it just because you sell a $60,000 legal package to set up funds for people? I don't know. It's a bizarre thing because it's a tool on the table. And for multifamily offices and institutional investors and some smaller investors, they love the diversification of a fund, but many don't. So I definitely would warn you, if somebody's been whispering fun in your ear and nothing else, then it's going to hurt you.
I think that's solid advice. Listen, this has been great. I appreciate you coming and being so generous with your advice and experience.
Sure.
What do you want to leave people with today?
I think that if you have a mindset of having the most fun year of your life and you focus on being ultra healthy, not just ultra wealthy, then by definition of having fun, you're not going to work on mediocre opportunities. You're going to get rid of bad employees. You're going to end bad partnerships, cancel joint ventures that aren't working. and only say yes to things that move the needle, and just don't go to any meetings you don't want to go to, then life will be more fun. It's not about constant vacation. It's about living in alignment with your vision, where you're going, who you are, and realizing that if you get lots and lots of money in life and you die early from bad health, you have lost and you are a failure, because you're basically telling everyone around you, we worship money in this house, not enjoying life, not fun adventure, not having a good social, emotional life. And we got, if you get divorced several times and addicted to alcohol just for the love of money, then you're a big failure, basically, right? So I think I want to leave people with that, because that, I think, is core to who we are and what we talk about at our investor club. And it's the more holistic definition of success than just, if the day you die, you want people just to say, well, that guy really knew how to make some money, and that's it, right? I mean, so, it's kind of meaningless. No one really cares how successful you are. They care about all of those other things and inspiring others while being successful.
A guy I'm working with quite a bit now, Michael Cole, wrote an excellent book on that after being part of like large private wealth management firms, multifamily offices, and
Yeah,
it's excellent. Well,
cool.
listen, what website should people be going to?
The best one would be familyoffices.com. And but my best email, which is easiest, just richard@investorclub.com. Or if they want to shoot me a text message, it's just 305-333-1155. And yeah, I'd be happy to have you at one of our events as our guest, or as a thank you for having me on here. And appreciate all you do. So I definitely want to keep in touch.
Okay, great. Thanks. Bye, everyone.